Well, our next guest does some absolutely outstanding work. His new piece dropping this morning. Illegal migrants less likely to commit crime? Question mark. Guess again. I'm Pete Mundo, mornings on KCMO in Kansas City, filling in for Vince Coglianese and John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and author of Gun Control Myths, to discuss his column, and does a great job with this topic in general, whether or not it is true, as we are told all the time, that yes, people might be here illegally, but they're not the ones committing crimes. John, what does your research show on this topic?
Well, thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, well, about a month before the election, the Biden administration's ICE sent a letter to a congressman from Texas, basically detailing some information on crimes committed by illegal aliens who had been released into the country. There's something like about 7.4 million so-called non-detained individuals that had gone through custody but had then been released. And ICE hadn't really done a very good job of checking them before they were released. And it turns out that about 662,000 of them had prior criminal histories, involving all sorts of violent crimes, from murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, as well as everything from embezzlement to fraud to you name it. And so that's 9% of those who were released. And there are a couple problems that indicate that that's likely to be a big underestimate of the problem. First of all, about 80% of those 7.4 million individuals were ones who voluntarily turned themselves in at the border. And those are unlikely to be the ones that are most problematic. The ones who are trying to avoid detection, you imagine, are the ones who have something to hide, like a criminal record. About 20% of them were ones that had been caught at the border. But it doesn't include things like so-called gotaways, people who we see coming across the border that we don't catch. And it doesn't include those that we never observed coming across the border. One of the things the Biden administration did was pull most of the border agents from guarding the border off into processing the illegals that were coming across. So they weren't watching the border. And recently, the Biden administration has finally admitted that about 30% of the passive monitoring, the cameras and other things that we have at the border that would try to monitor people who were sneaking across to kind of get a measure of the so-called gotaways, weren't working. So we had large portions of the border that had neither border agents nor any type of monitoring system to go and watch for them coming across. And God only knows how many millions fall into that category. About 2 million fall into the so-called gotaway category that's there. And so one would imagine that those are much more likely to have criminal backgrounds than the vast majority of these that were processed that had criminal backgrounds. So one of the things that we did, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please, continue.
One of the things that we did, the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Justice, has put together measures of the cost to victims of violent crime and property crime. Everything from like medical care that they had to get, lost wages, pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And if you assume that these criminals committed just one crime similar to the crime that ICE lists, and virtually all criminals commit many crimes that are there. I mean, your average murderer, for example, in the United States, 90% of them have violent criminal histories. But if you just take the one crime that ICE lists there and assume that they committed just one of those in the United States, what you find is that the victimization costs come to about $166 billion.
Wow.
So,
jeez.
And so there are many reasons to believe that that's an underestimate for all the reasons that I was just going through by a truly massive amount. But that's still a lot of money there.
Yeah. So what about this then? When you look at the new CBS News YouGov poll that dropped over the weekend, it was the first kind of poll that we've seen of this substance in the wake of the election results almost 3 weeks ago now. And it showed that Donald Trump starting a program to deport all illegal immigrants was at 57%. That is, if you were to listen to just more legacy media, you know as well as I do, John, you would think that the approval for that would be at like 15 or 20%, and it's at 57%. So that tells me Republicans, Democrats, across the board, people are fed up with this issue.
Right. Well, you had Laken Riley's, the conviction of her murderer last week. A lot of the media outlets from the Associated Press and the Washington Post and others didn't even refer to the murderer as being an illegal alien. But it's an example of someone who was involved in criminal gangs in Venezuela, whose record should have been picked up before he was released. Apparently, multiple times, the federal government had him in custody and reviewed his record before they released him. And yet they kept on releasing him time after time. One of the things that really differed between the Trump administration and the Biden administration is under Trump, we had remain in Mexico. And the Customs and Immigration Service would go and do a thorough background check on the individuals, including contacting their home country while they were remaining in Mexico before they were allowed to come into the United States. Unfortunately, they weren't involved in doing the background checks for the people that the Biden administration let in. They had ICE do that, and they never contacted the home countries for these individuals. And so, it's not too surprising that they would release a lot of people that we only find out later. And even that may be an incomplete list, and most likely is. I mean, one of the things that's come out from numerous agents in immigration is that the Biden administration has put pressure on agents to kind of underreport criminals coming into the country or terrorists coming into the country. And so one can only take even these numbers with a grain of salt and realize that that's just another reason why it likely underestimates the true scope of the problem.
So then what does this look like for Tom Homan, the new border czar, when he gets going in the new year? I mean, he's talking a great game. The question is, what kind of pushback will he get from states, from governors, blue governors, and from blue city mayors, where a lot of these folks are currently at illegally? How difficult is that going to make his job to do what needs to be done on this front?
Well, he's going to have a tough time. I mean, you just had a case this last week where a couple of child rapists in Boston were caught, but then released without informing ICE. One of those guys was a Brazilian who had apparently raped children in Brazil, or at least one child in Brazil. And, so if you have criminals that even the state and local governments from Massachusetts, Illinois, California, and other Democratic states across the country know that they're criminals, have had them in custody, but then release them without turning them over to ICE. It makes the job for the federal government much more difficult.
So on that note, and by the way, we're talking with John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. His new piece today, Illegal Migrants Less Likely to Commit Crime. Guess again. The Democrats obviously have a strategy around this border policy. This is not just one big mistake. Do you think there's even some buyer's remorse on just the pure numbers and the fact that they really tried to flood the system, for lack of a better word, so quickly over Joe Biden's 4 years that there might be some, well, maybe we should have slow played this thing a little bit more so the American people weren't as annoyed and ticked off and against this? Is that potentially part of what they're thinking? Do you have anybody on the inside that you've talked to on that front?
Well, one can look at what their behavior has been now since the election. I mean, people have heard about this app that people can go and arrange, to fly into the United States, not having to go through the border to get in. Mm-hmm. And one of the changes that the administration is pushing through now after the election is that when they fly into the United States, they no longer even need to meet with border agents here. We just take them at their word that everything that they put into the app application is correct. They don't have to show anything other than the information that they put into the app. But at least before, they required that they had to meet with the agent that's there. I mean, you could put in that you're a guy and a woman come in, or vice versa, and they'll just have to take your word for it that that's who you have that's being flown in.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, this is great stuff. Everybody should check out the piece by John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, and, of course, the author of Gun Control Myths. John, thank you for being here on WMAL. So appreciate the time.
Well, thank you. People can find more at our website at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You as well, my friend. Thanks so much for being here. That's John Lott on WMAL. I'm Pete Mundo out of Kansas City. KCMO Talk Radio is where you find me in the mornings, filling in for Vince Coglianese as we roll through the 5 o'clock hour here on the show. So this whole topic, first off, I'm glad that John's hitting on it. We've got this issue potentially in Kansas City with two of the biggest superstars on the planet, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Now, you might think, well, this is a Kansas City story. It's not. I mean, you know as well as I do, if you are not living under a rock, you know who those two guys are, right? Quarterback of the Chiefs and, of course, the boyfriend of Taylor Swift. If you want to know him by that moniker, that's fine too. I'll call him the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. But if he's just Taylor's boyfriend, cool. I mean, that's great. Whatever you want to call him. You know who he is. So early October, Chiefs are playing a Monday Night Football game, and we found out from TMZ a couple of weeks ago that both these guys' homes were burglarized. And it was the Sunday and the Monday going into that Monday Night Football game. Now, these two guys, Mahomes and Kelce, they don't live next door to each other. One's in Missouri, the other one's in Kansas. Kelce actually moved to this home that was a gated community because when he started dating Taylor, he was in just like a regular neighborhood. Now, nice neighborhood, but regular neighborhood where paparazzi could basically sit on his front porch. So he had to go find a gated neighborhood. So he found that. So he moved there about a year ago. And then Mahomes built this big home that you might have seen on the quarterback Netflix series he did. And that finished up about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago now. That's on the Missouri side. So both these guys were burglarized same night. And it turned out, or it's turning out, the belief is, it was first reported here locally, then it's reported nationally the last couple of days, that it appears to be a South American crime ring that is also hitting other athletes in other parts of the Midwest and potentially other wealthy people who are not famous. There was somebody else who was hit with a $500,000 jewelry heist here in the area that's believed to be tied to the Mahomes-Kelce burglaries. Now, you tell me, while it's not confirmed yet, you've had local and national media confirm the reporting that the investigation has taken authorities down the road of South American crime rings. You tell me whether or not you think that ties in to what's going on with the border. And the fact that you have had 4 years of basically unfettered illegal immigration and the worst actors on the planet who may want to do things, whether it's the horrific Laken Riley story, whether it's stories like this, burglarizing world-famous individuals and not getting much out of it as far as we know, but still making the attempt. God forbid, had somebody been home, who knows what that would have looked like. I mean, all of these things come together. And even if it's just fender benders, I mean, you ask insurance salesmen, they'll tell you, because I know them, insurance has gone up to the moon the last few years. In large part, people are driving without car insurance. There's more people who are not here legally who are driving vehicles on our roads. All that stuff stacks up. All of it. And that's why I am in no way surprised. I know I saw some of this on social media on Sunday. People were blown away that Trump has a 57% approval rating for his policy to deport illegal immigrants. It's like, dude, if you talk to regular folks, whether it's here in Kansas City or where you are in Washington, D.C., like regular people, they're not offended by this. They're not. And if blue state politicians and blue city politicians are going to get in the way, they are doing it at their own political peril. And they are not understanding what 3 weeks ago tomorrow was in large part really about. Well, we've got our buddy Chris Plant there on KCMO. Great guy, hysterical. Glad to be here on WMAL. I'm Pete Mundo. Mornings on KCMO in Kansas City. So I saw a lot of people talking about how Thanksgiving dinner is apparently going to be down 5% this year when it comes to the average cost. Down 5% from last year. Estimates are at $58.08 for a 10-person gathering. I don't know what you're feeding 10 people for $58 outside of Kraft mac and cheese, but either way, that's what CNBC is insisting. And I saw a lot of people say, well, you know, this is great news. Oh, my goodness, we told you Biden's doing the work. He's hustling here. Okay, let's look at the cost of Thanksgiving this year compared to 2019. Turkey's up 23%. I'll repost this on X at Pete Mundo. Turkey's up 23%. Stuffing's up 52%. Ham's up 62%. Rolls are up 67%. Pumpkin pie mix up 25%. Pie shells up 35%. Green beans. Who likes green beans, though? They're up 21%. I'm thankful that Trump is going to be our 47th president so we can make Thanksgiving affordable again. It doesn't sound as good as MAGA or MAHA, but MATA, if that makes sense, sign me up for some of that. Coming up, the biggest shift that we are seeing that may change generations in our political landscape we'll get to next. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on WMAL. Oh, man, there is so much to be thankful for this week. It is great to be here with you. I'm Pete Mundo. I host mornings on KCMO in Kansas City, filling in for Vince Coglianese on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news. 888-630-WMAL is how you join us this afternoon. So we are getting just more exit poll data and information on specific voting blocks and net shifts of voting blocks from 2012, 2016, 2020 to 2024. And this stood out to me from the New York Times when I saw it here recently. And it was the shift in, we know that most demographics shifted from Biden to Trump, Republican, or Democrat to Republican over the last 4 years, right? Every demographic group you can break down outside of college-educated women who moved slightly to the left, not much towards Kamala, but slightly from where they were with Biden. And then those making over $100,000 a year, slightly to the left, you had massive swings to the right, double digits for Hispanic Americans, young Americans, I mean, across the board. You had some big shifts to the right. But what the New York Times did recently, and I thought this was a great idea. I mean, not good for Democrats, but just a great idea to kind of see the shift towards Republicans from 2012 to 2024. That was Barack Obama's reelection 12 years ago. The numbers are just astounding. So there will be groups in here that you would expect to shift to the right that we've spent a lot of time talking about. Let's say non-whites, or let's say whites with no college degree. They shifted towards Republicans by 13 points over the last 12 years. Now, that's the group that gets the most attention, right? That's always the Donald Trump diehard MAGA voter that the media loves to talk about. It's never that simple, but that's who they like to kind of pinpoint as the group that Donald Trump has just totally wrapped around his finger, and there's nothing anyone's going to do about it, and it's based on racism and sexism and misogyny and all these ridiculous things they love to claim. Well, that's not even one of the largest swings. How about non-white voters with no degree, no college degree? They have swung 37 points towards Republicans since 2012. They were Democrat plus 64. They are now Democrat plus 27. 37-point swing. How about this? Non-whites with a bachelor's degree. They have moved 21 points to the right. They were Democrat plus 58. They are now Democrat plus 37. What about racial makeups? Blacks, net shift, Republican plus 19 over the last 12 years. They were Democrat plus 91. Now they're Democrat plus 72. Hispanics, Republican plus 29 shift. They were Democrat plus 39. Now they're Democrat plus 10. Asian Americans, Republicans shifting towards them plus 17. And then the age groups. The 18 to 29-year-olds have shifted towards Republicans by 14 points over the last 12 years, compared 2012 to 2024. They were Democrat plus 25. Now they're Democrat plus 11. 30 to 44 shifted Republicans by 8 points. D plus 9 and 12 to D plus 2 this month. This is one of those things that could absolutely, if it holds, could be Reagan-esque in terms of a shifting electorate. It doesn't mean there's never going to be another Democrat elected president. There absolutely will. That's how this country works and operates. But when you look at that kind of data, and you see especially, working class folks, minorities, across the board, everybody in large part in this graphic that the New York Times put up that I will repost right now on X at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. You will see it for yourself that there was a massive, massive shift towards the Republican Party with all of these groups. The coalition that Donald Trump has put together is not just the white working class that people think of, when they think of like J.D. Vance's best-selling book, Hillbilly Elegy. That was the talking point back in 2016. How did Trump win? Oh, the Rust Belt states and the white working class, and they've been disenfranchised. That's not what happened this month. What happened here is that what you saw take place, instead of just being able to put it into this cute little box of a white working class voter, what you saw now was the revenge of common sense. Because it doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a skin color. It doesn't have a sexual orientation. It was just people waking up and being like, yeah, this ain't working. And sure, Donald Trump's Trump, and, he's got his Trumpisms, and he's flawed just like all of us are. But, dang, when I stack up those 4 years versus these past 4 years, it's not close. I know what I'm doing. I know what direction this country needs to go right now, and it's not more of this. It's not. I can't keep this charade going. I'm done. And it wasn't because of one voting block. And that's what's got to drive them absolutely nuts right now. So you can see this, if you want, on my X page at Pete Mundo. I just posted it there. And comparing the Obama years when really the Democrats had this thing humming, right? They were still the party of the working class, and they were making strides and gains with college-educated folks. Kind of the old-school country club Republican was shifting their way in some respects, and they were like, this is perfect. We've got the colleges that are becoming our indoctrination centers. We're getting voters there. We've already got our working class. We've got all these, and they thought that, the surge in immigration, especially from Central and South America, was going to benefit them tremendously. These people would assimilate. They'd become Americans. They'd vote for Democrats. Everything was trending in their direction. Republicans were told they could not win. Instead, what happened? What happened is that people became Americans of all backgrounds and all colors, and they said, you know what? In the end, you know what I like? I like the American dream. That's what I like. You know what I don't like? My grocery bill going up 20, 25%. And even Brian Williams, take a listen to Brian Williams of all people. When he's not lying about jumping out of planes in the Middle East, he's making a little bit of sense on Seth Meyers talking about how the Democratic Party has become the party of pandering and elitism. Cut 8.
I think it's insulting when members of the working class, which the Democratic Party has lost entirely in our lifetimes, to insist the economy is doing great. A 12-pack of Bounty is $40. Rich folks don't feel that. Poor folks already switched to Sparkle during the COVID, during the lockdown. And I think telling them that the NASDAQ is gangbusters is further insulting. It's insulting. I think the biggest unforced error of the Biden administration by far was the border. To tell people it's not a problem is insulting. For the working class to see incoming migrants getting welcome bags, debit cards, and motel rooms is probably insulting as well. So there's a lot of work to do. You know, it was when they handed out camo hats that said Harris Walls, and the Democrats they were kind of charmed by that. Their party has gone quinoa, and the rest of America's eating at Cracker Barrel. And so it was kind of an ironic use of something millions of Americans put on their heads to start their day every day. Yeah, they need to reach out to America again.
Easy on the Cracker Barrel jokes there, Brian Williams, but I get the point, and it's a good one. Inflation didn't impact high six-figure earners who could continue to play the woke game and put up their yard signs and act virtuous at their cocktail parties. Regular people were feeling real pain. And Brian Williams summarized it pretty well in Seth Meyers. Not sure that's what Seth Meyers' audience wanted to hear, but who cares? Brian Williams, back from the dead, delivering a little bit of common sense to people that need to hear it. And that's why some of these exit poll numbers that continue to come out, and when you compare the shift to whether it's 4 years ago or 12 years ago during Obama's reelection, it has got to scare the bejesus out of the higher powers in the Democratic Party. The question is, do they have the willingness to turn it around? Because, you see and I see a lot of what's going on out there. And instead of saying, hey, you know what? We've got to connect with people. We're not going to talk about 17 different genders. We're not going to talk about Latinxes or Latinxes, whatever some people tell me it's Latinx. I just call it Latinx because it sounds good. But, we're not going to treat people like they're just subjects of certain genders and certain races and certain sexual orientations. Just treat people like they're normal individuals. Treat them as individuals. You'll get a lot further. The pandering, the elitism is just so gross. And if nothing else, people are voting against that. People don't want more of that. They don't want to be talked down to and pandered to anymore. And the jig feels like it's up in so many respects. And that's what you're seeing. And he mentioned the NASDAQ there, too. Listen, the stock market is a part of the economy. It's not the economy. And that's why for the last 3 years, what did you hear? Hey, stop worrying about the cost of eggs. Your 401k is doing great. Okay, maybe it is. But three things. I can't touch my 401k in many cases for decades, depending on your age. Number two, I'd like to give more to that 401k. I can't because the cost of the rest of my life continues to go up. And then part three, how many people simply don't have a 401k because they're not able to afford it right now? But we were told the economy is the stock market. It's not. Now, the Dow Jones did have a record day today, and that's believed to be in large part by Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary pick, Scott Bessent. So I want the markets to do well. But the markets are not Main Street. The markets have never been Main Street. They're a part of the economy that we should want to succeed. But what you know is this. If Main Street's doing well, the markets are going to do well. If the markets are doing well, it doesn't necessarily mean Main Street is doing well. So in the meantime, what are you seeing in different parts of, Hollywood, social media? Well, if you are not on the Rosie O'Donnell meltdown train, boy, have I got a treat for you. Rosie O'Donnell, who keeps looking like Mark Cuban, or maybe Mark Cuban's looking like Rosie O'Donnell. I don't know. Mark Cuban, Rachel Maddow, and Rosie O'Donnell, they keep looking like the same person. It just depends on who's coloring their hair in a given day. I don't know. It's getting weird to me. I keep confusing the three of them. But Rosie O'Donnell, I did confirm this is her, put out a video. And the video is her having a bit of a meltdown about Donald Trump's election from 3 weeks ago now. She still can't get over it. And she's sitting in her backyard, and she is talking to her squirrels. So I've kind of gone through this every time she puts out a new video. Rosie O'Donnell is like going through a therapy session about Donald Trump while talking to these squirrels who have become her friends in her backyard. And it keeps getting better because now she's calling the squirrels in her backyard baby. Like she's treating them like they're her children. It's getting weird in the land of Rosie O'Donnell. And here it is, cut 7.
Anyway, everybody, hope you're feeling, excuse me, hope you're feeling good. Hope that you're paying attention to what's going on, but trying to stay informed and knowledgeable about what's happening here in our country. I don't understand why, like the news, the sirens aren't going, you know. Warning, warning, Will Robinson. Break glass in case of emergency. Break glass, it's an emergency. Like it's an emergency. Everybody's just going on like it's nothing. Lodio do, you know. I don't understand. The Democrats have been disappointing, to say the least. Don't talk about politics. How can you not in today's political culture? How can you not?
Talk to the squirrels. Talk to the squirrels. Come on, Rosie, get to
difficult.
it. Here we go. Talk to the
Very difficult
squirrels.
for everybody, I think. All sides of the equation.
Yeah.
You know, and the people who voted for Trump with the hopes
Here we go.
of lowering prices, you know. Saw, what did I see on TV? Brian Williams on
Oh, here it
Seth
is.
Meyers
Yeah.
giving a talking down to the, hello, baby. Come here.
Oh, there's the squirrel.
There you go. You can get it. You want me to entice you more? I'll put down another one. That's 2. This little guy is shy. Right there. This guy. See that guy?
Oh, my goodness. You know, when you enter the insane asylums, there's crazy, there's super crazy, there is insane, and the most extreme level of insanity when you go into the asylums is talking to and feeding the squirrels crazy. Like that is maximum level of insanity when they commit you. And I know Rosie O'Donnell's there. This video is also up on my X page at Pete Mundo, so you can follow me there and see it. I posted it it might have been it was this morning. It was while I was on the air in Kansas City that I posted it. And it is just pure gold because she's sitting there on her back patio. And at first I'm like, oh, she's got to be talking to like her golden retriever or something. And then she pans to the squirrels and she starts talking about, I don't know how you tell squirrels apart. They all look the same. And she's like, oh, this is my friend. He likes to eat the nuts over here. It's like there's only one person who's eating too many nuts, and it's Rosie O'Donnell. She is nuts. And you're starting to see it now bleed over to these videos she's posting on social media. But I'm here to tell you, I am all about them. It is you want to talk about something I'm thankful for? It's these Rosie O'Donnell videos. It's just content gold. And then she's ripping Brian Williams, the clip that we just played a few minutes ago, for talking down to Democrats. You guys have spent 4 years talking down to everyday Americans, and on November 5th, they said, I'm done. I'm out. I'm sick of the pandering. I want no part of it. But Rosie O'Donnell will be the last one to realize that. As she sits on the back patio in what looks like Southern California, Palm Beach, or palm trees, beautiful guest house, and acting like she's heading to the gulag. You're going to be okay, Rosie. Please. I can't speak for the squirrels, but I guess if you keep feeding them and treating them like indoor cats, they'll be okay too. I'm Pete Mundo. KCMO in Kansas City is where you find me in the mornings. I'm here on WMAL. Well, it's been great to be here with you this afternoon. Pete Mundo hosting mornings on KCMO in Kansas City on WMAL. Thank you for the last 3 hours. You can find me on X at Pete Mundo, also on Instagram at Pete Mundo, and on Facebook as well if you want to connect with me further. Lot to be thankful for, especially after the last 3 weeks or so. I'm going to keep just bathing in those crocodile tears of the left and having a great time doing it. Have an awesome evening. We'll talk to you soon. Pete Mundo in for Vince Coglianese on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.